a sweltering October morning in 1942, the Desert Fox lay flat on his back in an Austrian hospital bed, his body betraying him at the worst possible moment. Erwin Rommel's liver was inflamed. His stomach churned violently. Doctors demanded absolute rest. And for once, the most aggressive general in the German army actually listened. Why wouldn't he? His intelligence reports from North Africa painted a picture of total British paralysis. The British 8th Army, his analysts told him, had overstretched supply lines. Their water pipeline remained unfinished. Their armored divisions had scattered southward, invisible and useless. Rommel closed his eyes in that Austrian clinic believing he had weeks to recover. Then the phone rang. General George Stummy's voice crackled from Cairo, a massive artillery barrage, the entire El Alamein front has erupted. Rommel was on a plane within hours. But here's what he didn't know yet. His tanks were already going nowhere. Not destroyed. Not outnumbered. Simply dry. No fuel to move. No fuel to fight. No fuel to run. How does the most mobile armored force in history get caught completely still? The answer isn't a battle. It's a magic trick called Operation Bertram. And it worked because the British took everything they were bad at and built a weapon from it. What if your greatest weakness was actually your sharpest knife? Here's what everyone got wrong in 1942. The conventional wisdom said Britain's problem in the Western Desert was courage, equipment quality, leadership. Rommel had better tanks, better tactics, better commanders. The narrative wrote itself. But the narrative missed one thing. The British had an almost supernatural ability to lie, to conceal, to misdirect, and most devastatingly, to strangle an enemy's fuel supply from 1,500 miles away without the enemy even noticing until his fist swung and hit nothing. Standard military thinking in 1942 worshipped the armored counterattack. Mass your tanks. Strike hard at the breakthrough point. Win North Africa. Rommel had proved this formula worked at Gazala just months earlier, shattering British brigades that outnumbered his panzers nearly 2-1. German doctrine was built for Bewegungskrieg, war of movement. Fluid. Fast. Their Panzer IV with its 75mm gun could outrange and outpunch most British armor. On paper, sitting still was the one thing Rommel could never afford. Critics of Montgomery's slow, methodical approach before El Alamein said he was wasting Britain's only real advantage, time. They were right that time mattered. They were wrong about why. The secret lived in fuel arithmetic. The Afrika Korps needed roughly 400 tons of supplies daily just to survive in the desert. When Rommel ran his preferred tempo, constant movement, rapid flanking attacks, that number climbed past 600 tons per day. Here's the killer. Every kilometer the front line sat farther from Tripoli multiplied the transport burden exponentially. Because every truck delivering supplies also burned petrol to get there and back. By October 1942, Rommel's supply line stretched nearly 1,800 kilometers from Tripoli to El Alamein. The 8th Army's railhead? Barely 100 kilometers behind their front line. Montgomery didn't just have more fuel than Rommel. He had a supply position so astronomically superior that Rommel would have needed to win immediately, or not at all. The British knew this. The Germans had no idea how badly they were losing the logistics war. How do you hide an entire army in the middle of an open desert? This is where Operation Bertram becomes genuinely strange. Between August and October 1942, a British deception team built what amounted to a 40-square-mile theater set in the sand. 800 fake tanks. Assembled from canvas, wood, and paint. Positioned in the southern sector where German reconnaissance aircraft couldn't miss them. These weren't crude props. They were carefully scaled. Strategically shadowed. Arranged in formation patterns that screamed real armored concentration preparing to strike south. German pilots photographed them repeatedly throughout September and October. General Wilhelm von Thoma, commanding the Afrika Korps in Rommel's absence, reported confidently, the primary British threat appears to be from the south. He repositioned his reserves accordingly. But here's what those dummy tanks were hiding. The real 1st and 10th Armored Divisions, nearly 1,000 tanks including 285 new American M4 Shermans that could finally match the Panzer IV, were concealed in the northern sector. Hidden beneath camouflage netting in a zone called Motello. The camouflage wasn't just visual. Each tank was positioned to hide its own track marks in the sand. Supply dumps containing 340,000 tons of fuel, ammunition, and rations were buried beneath stacked crates and old vehicles, disguised from the air as unimportant junk. The deception was so thorough that even British infantry units nearby had no idea an armored fist sat a few hundred meters behind them. Meanwhile, along the rear areas, the British built an equally brilliant piece of theater: a fake water pipeline. Desert armies need catastrophic amounts of water. The 8th Army consumed 7,000 tons daily by late 1942. No attacker would commit to an offensive without visible water infrastructure. So the British laid fake pipeline, oil drums connected in a line with occasional mock pumping stations, extending southward at a deliberately slow pace. About 3 meters per week. German intelligence tracked its progress. Calculated it wouldn't reach the front until November at the earliest. That single piece of information proved decisive. Rommel's staff concluded any major British offensive was still weeks away. In reality, the 8th Army had already prepositioned 600 water tanks in the attack zone, and was ready on October 23rd, precisely when German intelligence least expected it. The proof came within 72 hours. When Montgomery's artillery opened the battle with 882 guns firing simultaneously, von Thomann's initial response was to push his armored reserves forward. They moved perhaps 15 kilometers before fuel shortages began immobilizing units at the worst possible moment. The 21st Panzer Division, stationed in the south precisely because German intelligence said that's where the threat lay, burned significant reserves racing north once the true attack direction became clear. By the time it arrived, nearly out of petrol. What happens to the world's best tank force when its gas gauge hits empty at the start of the biggest battle? A captured diary from a Panzer IV crew member of the 21st Panzer, recovered after the battle, noted on October 26, "We sit without fuel. The British are everywhere north of us." This wasn't logistics failure chaos. This was deliberate attrition. The battle is won before the first shell lands, it's won in the fuel depot. The Ultra program, Britain's code-breaking operation at Bletchley Park, had been feeding Montgomery near-complete knowledge of every supply ship crossing the Mediterranean since August 1942. The Royal Air Force and Royal Navy weren't intercepting Axis convoys by chance. They were reading the shipping manifests before the ships left Italian ports. Of 14 fuel tankers dispatched to North Africa between August and November 1942, the British sank or severely damaged 8. The tanker Proserpina, carrying 5,000 tons of fuel desperately needed by the Afrika Korps, was sunk by RAF Bristol Beaufighters on October 26, 1942, 3 days into the battle. The tanker Tegest was sunk in Tobruk harbor the same day. Rommel, who had been banking on those deliveries to sustain any counterattack, recorded in his diary, "With the enemy's complete mastery of the air, it was doubtful whether these supplies would ever arrive." German commanders weren't clinging to tradition or overlooking the supply situation. They had been systematically deceived about its true state. Rommel's intelligence chief, Major Friedrich von Mellenthin, wrote after the war that his office consistently received optimistic fuel estimates that didn't reflect actual battlefield availability. Why? Because rear area logistics officers reported what had been shipped, not what survived the crossing. The British deception worked on multiple levels simultaneously. False information about timing, false information about direction, and accurate destruction of real supplies. All coordinated so Rommel's operational picture bore almost no resemblance to reality. By November 4, 1942, when Montgomery launched Operation Supercharge to complete the breakthrough, the Afrika Korps had fewer than 80 operational tanks remaining. Rommel ordered a retreat westward. He had barely enough fuel to move his infantry, let alone conduct a coherent mobile defense. Captured Axis after-action reports from Panzerarmee Afrika headquarters, reviewed by British intelligence in December 1942, noted that logistic system failure had been decisive in preventing any organized armored response during the critical first 48 hours of the British attack. What made this work wasn't any single feature of the deception. It was the interlocking nature of it. The dummy tanks in the south misdirected German reserves. The fake pipeline set the wrong timeline in German minds. The real supplies hidden in plain sight gave Montgomery offensive capacity Rommel couldn't imagine existed. The ultra intercepts allowed the RAF to drain the one resource, fuel, that Rommel's entire doctrine of fluid mobile warfare depended upon. And it was all coordinated months in advance with a precision and patience that stood in deliberate contrast to Rommel's own bold, improvised style. Armies that see clearly will always destroy armies that cannot see at all. Battlefields aren't testing grounds for elegant theories. They are places where vision kills blindness. At El Alamein, the British didn't simply outfight the Afrika Korps. They made certain that the most mobile, most aggressive armored force in the desert was sitting absolutely still, engines cold, when the drums of war began beating. The Desert Fox ran. But he never ran out of fuel. He was never given any. If you made it this far, drop a like for War Real History, and tell me in the comments, what other historical deception operation should we expose next?